My name is Carol M. Callison, and I am 29 years old. I should have known something was wrong the first time Julian introduced me to his friends, because even then, before the birthday dinner, before the humiliation, before he called me temporary in front of 16 people, I already felt like I was auditioning for a part I had never agreed to play. Julian Reeves and I had been dating for 8 months when everything finally snapped, but the signs started much earlier. 3 months in, he invited me to meet his core group at a cocktail bar in Tribeca, the kind of place where the lighting is designed to make rich people look tragic, and the drinks cost more than my weekly grocery budget in college. I wore my best blazer, clean and fitted, bought off the rack with money I had actually earned. I remember checking myself in the bathroom mirror before walking in, telling myself I belonged there because Julian had invited me. His friends looked like they had been assembled by a luxury brand. Connor with his watch that cost more than my car, Brittany with her perfect blowout, Madison laughing too loudly beside her husband Greg, and Ethan, the only one who smiled at me like a person instead of a resume. Connor was the first to test me. "So, Carol," he said, fingers tapping against his glass. "What do you do?" "Architecture," I said. That got polite nods. Not interest, polite nods. "Which firm?" I named it. Mid-sized, respected, steady, doing meaningful commercial and civic work. I was proud of it. Connor's smile thinned. "Oh," he said. "I thought you meant one of the big ones." The conversation moved on like I had failed a test and been dismissed from the room. On the Uber home, Julian noticed I was quiet. "You barely talked tonight," he said. I felt like I was being interviewed for a position I didn't apply for. He frowned. "They're just protective." Protective or checking if I have the right credentials. That's not fair. "Do you care about that stuff?" I asked. He took my hand and kissed my knuckles. "No. I like you for you." I wanted to believe him, I really did, but people can lie softly, and somehow that makes it easier to miss. Month 4, my firm won a small but prestigious design award. I was thrilled. It was the first time my work had been recognized beyond internal praise, the kind of milestone that makes all the late nights and coffee-stained sketches feel worth something. Julian posted about it once on his Instagram story. No tag, no photo of us. Just a vague, proud of someone special with a city skyline. When I asked why he didn't tag me, he said he didn't like mixing personal and professional online. Month 5, we ran into his ex-girlfriend, Priscilla Vale, at a charity gala. She was everything his world admired. Finance background, silk dress, antique Cartier bracelet, stories about summers in Nantucket, told like weather reports. Julian lit up talking to her in a way I had not seen in weeks. On the drive home, he stared out the window. "What?" I asked. "Nothing," he said. But something had shifted. By month 6, Priscilla's name started appearing everywhere. Priscilla knew the owner of that gallery. Priscilla once took him to a private dinner at Cipriani. Priscilla had impossible standards, but apparently that was said with admiration. I told myself I was not insecure. And maybe I was not. Maybe I was just observant. Then my parents visited the city. I had been excited for Julian to meet them properly. My father worked decades in a machine shop. My mother still lived in the same modest Queens apartment, where I learned how to draw buildings on the backs of old envelopes. Julian was polite but uncomfortable. He smiled too carefully, checked his phone too often, and later called them sweet in a tone that made the word feel small. 2 weeks before his birthday, Julian announced he was doing something big. Dinner at Maria. 16 people. A private reservation. "That's like $300 a person," I said, staring at the restaurant link. "It's my birthday. I only turned 28 once." "I'm not saying don't celebrate. I'd love to take you somewhere special, just us." He laughed without warmth. God, you sound like my dad trying to teach me about budgets. Julian. Everyone pays for themselves anyway. You can afford one nice dinner, can't you? It's not about affording it. It's about you wanting to perform for people instead of just being with someone. His expression went cold. Not everyone is satisfied with just being, Carol. Some of us have standards. The week before his birthday, I finished his gift. A custom architectural drawing of the building where we first met, a gallery opening where we talked for 3 hours, and he told me I was the most interesting woman he had met in years. I showed it to my sister Sophie. She looked at the framed drawing for a long time, then looked at me. Carol, she said gently, are you happy? I forced a laugh. What kind of question is that? A real one, because from the outside it looks like you're trying really hard to make someone happy who doesn't try back. I told her she did not know him like I did. But deep down, I was starting to wonder if she saw him clearer because she was not in love with him. The night of Julian's birthday, I arrived at Maria in the best dress I owned and the kind of heels that made every step feel like a negotiation. The restaurant was stunning in that cold, expensive way, all floor-to-ceiling windows, ocean-colored murals, white tablecloths, and servers who spoke softly enough to make everyone else lower their voices. Julian's friends were already there, champagne flowing, laughter floating around the table like I had walked into the middle of a story where my part had not been written. Julian wore a dark designer suit I had never seen before. Definitely new. Definitely expensive. He kissed my cheek, not my lips, and took the wrapped frame from my hands without really looking at it. Oh, you can just put that on the gift table, he said. Gift table. Of course there was a gift table. Tiffany boxes, Cartier ribbons, glossy bags with embossed logos, all arranged like offerings. My simple brown paper wrapping looked almost embarrassed beside them. The seating arrangement told me everything. Julian sat near the head of the long table, surrounded by Brittany, Connor, Madison, and people I had only seen in photos. I was placed near the far end, between Greg, who was already halfway drunk, and an empty chair. I tried not to take it personally. That was the theme of our relationship by then. Try not to take it personally when he forgot to introduce you properly. Try not to take it personally when he answered everyone else first. Try not to take it personally when the man who once said you fascinated him now barely looked in your direction. The first hour was death by 1,000 polished insults. Greg turned to me once and said, "So, architect? That's cool. Like houses?" I said, "Commercial buildings mostly. We just finished a library renovation downtown." He nodded while already looking past me. "Yeah, cool. Very cool." Down the table, Madison's voice carried. "Julian, remember when Priscilla took you to Cipriani for your birthday? That was iconic." Julian laughed. He did not correct her. Did not mention I was sitting 10 feet away with a handmade gift on the table behind us. Then Connor asked what I drove. The whole table seemed to hear the question before I answered. "A Honda Civic," I said. "Reliable." Greg clapped me on the shoulder like I had made a joke. Connor leaned back and said he had just gotten the new Porsche Taycan. Electric. 180,000. He said the number casually, like commenting on the weather, but everyone knew why he said it. Because he could. Because I could not. Julian was on his third glass of champagne when Priscilla walked in. He saw her before I did. His whole face changed, brightening in a way I had spent months trying to bring back. "Priscilla," he called, standing too quickly. He hugged her too long. She looked exactly like the kind of woman people in that room would call effortless, though everything about her had clearly been curated. She greeted me with a polite, "Nice to meet you," that somehow made me feel like staff. Then she took the empty chair next to Julian. For the next 40 minutes, I watched him become someone else. Animated, charming, touching her wrist when he laughed. leaning toward her like gravity had changed. He had not looked at me in over an hour. Dessert arrived, and Brittany stood with a glass in her hand. "Speech time," she announced. Everyone groaned playfully. "Happy birthday to my gorgeous best friend, who is successful, impossible, and way too good for most women in this city." Laughter rippled around the table. Then she turned toward Julian. "But he did bring a date tonight, so come on, Jules, introduce your girlfriend properly." Julian stood, unsteady but smiling. "Okay, everyone, this is Carol." He gestured vaguely toward me. "She's my girlfriend." Then he made air quotes. A few people chuckled. I went very still. "But seriously, Carol," he said, looking at me now with a smirk that made my stomach drop. "Don't get any ideas. You're just temporary." The table went quiet in that awful way people get quiet when cruelty arrives wearing a joke. "Julian," Madison said softly. "What?" He laughed. "I'm being honest. That's healthy, right? Communication." He glanced at Priscilla, then back at me. "She's sweet. She's fine. But she's not exactly endgame." Brittany tried to laugh it off. "Oh my God, Jules, you're terrible." "She's like a palate cleanser," Julian continued, gaining momentum from the discomfort. "You know, sorbet between courses, a bridge from Priscilla to whoever comes next." I looked at him. "Is that what you think I am?" "Oh, don't be sensitive. You knew what this was." "No," I said quietly. "I really didn't." He gestured around the table, at the money, the glass, the people he had spent all night trying to impress. "Come on, Carol. Did you really think we were going to get married?" Dead silence. I stood slowly, pulled out my wallet, and counted enough cash for my meal, my drinks, and a generous tip. I placed it beside my plate. "You're right about one thing," I said. Julian blinked. "What?" "I can handle the truth." Then I walked to the gift table and picked up the frame I had spent weeks making. His face shifted then, panic cutting through the champagne. "Carol, sit down. You're making a scene." "You called me a palate cleanser in front of 16 people. The scene already happened." I looked at him one last time. Guess the temporary part just ended. Then I left without rushing, without crying, without giving him the performance he deserved. I sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes after leaving Maria. My hands rested on the steering wheel, but I was not really holding it. I was just breathing. The city moved around me in muffled sounds. Tires over concrete, elevator doors opening, distant laughter from people leaving restaurants where nobody had been publicly reduced to a joke. I expected tears. I expected rage. Instead, I felt a strange, clean emptiness, like something heavy had finally been lifted because I no longer had to pretend I did not know what Julian thought of me. I unwrapped the gift on my lap. The architectural drawing was beautiful. That almost hurt more. Every line was precise, every shadow carefully layered, every window measured from the photos I had taken of the gallery where Julian and I first met. I had spent weeks making it. I had imagined his face softening when he opened it. I had imagined him saying, "You remembered." Instead, I had carried it back out like evidence of a love only one of us had been building. I drove to Marin's apartment. She was my closest friend, the kind of woman who could read devastation from the way I knocked. She opened the door, took one look at me, and said, "Who died?" "Me, apparently," I said, and then I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, arms crossed, jaw getting tighter with every sentence. When I repeated the palate cleanser part, she whispered, "I will bury him." I almost smiled. "Don't. He already did it himself." She poured me tea I did not drink and made space on the couch. Is he going to call? Probably. Are you going to answer? No. At 10:47 p.m., my phone rang. Julian. I watched it vibrate against Marin's coffee table until it stopped. 5 minutes later, it rang again. Then a voicemail appeared. I played only the beginning before deleting it. Carol, hi, it's me. I think maybe we should talk. I was drinking and I said some things that came out wrong. You know how I get when I drink. It was supposed to be funny. Funny. That word made my stomach turn. At 11:47, he left another one. Carol, please, I'm sorry. I didn't mean you were temporary. I don't know what I meant. I was drunk and stupid and trying to impress people who don't even matter. You matter. You've always mattered. Please call me back. I can fix this. I did not call. The texts kept coming. Are you awake? I know you're seeing these. Can we please talk? I'm sorry. All delivered. None read. I turned my phone face down and slept on Marin's couch. The next morning, I woke up lighter than I had felt in months. By Sunday, his tone had changed. You're really going to ignore me over a joke? Then, this is childish. Then, adults communicate, Carol. The irony nearly made me laugh. I had communicated for 8 months. I had asked questions, made space, swallowed insults, explained feelings, adjusted myself until I barely recognized my own reflection. He called me temporary in front of his ex-girlfriend and 16 people, and now he wanted mature conversation? My sister Sophie called that afternoon. Did Julian just call me? I closed my eyes. Yes. I told him to lose my number. What did he say? That you misunderstood, that he was drunk, that you embarrassed him by walking out. Of course. Somehow, even leaving quietly had humiliated him more than his speech humiliated me. Sophie's voice sharpened. I told him drunk words are sober thoughts. Over the next week, Julian tried everything. Apologetic texts, angry texts, flowers sent to my office. I had them donated to the hospital. He called my firm and left a message with reception. I did not return it. On day 6, he sent an email with the subject line, "Please read this." I read it twice. It was beautifully written, annoyingly so. He admitted he was insecure. He admitted he cared too much about what his friends thought. He said I made him feel grounded, and that scared him because his whole life had been about appearing untouchable. He wrote, "You were never temporary to me. I was just too much of a coward to admit you were exactly what I needed." 8 months earlier, those words might have saved us. Now, they only proved he had known better. Marin found me staring at the screen. What does it say? Everything I needed to hear before he humiliated me. And now? I hit delete. Nothing I need now. The consequences came faster than I expected. Ethan stopped answering Julian's calls. Madison grew distant. Greg told people the dinner was brutal and he had lost respect for him. Even Brittany, his best friend, apparently told him, "That was harsh, Jules. Like, really harsh." Connor ran into me at a work event 2 weeks later and pulled me aside. For what it's worth, he said awkwardly, what he did was messed up. Some of us saw that. I thanked him because, strangely, it mattered. Julian had performed cruelty for a crowd, thinking the crowd would applaud. Instead, the room remembered. For the first 2 weeks after the dinner, I stayed at Marin's place and let my own life grow quiet around me. Julian's messages still came, but less often now, like even his desperation had started to tire itself out. I went to work. I slept on Marin's couch. I took long walks after dark through streets where nobody knew me as the woman Julian Reeves had called a palate cleanser. The city did not care who had humiliated me, and somehow that helped. It kept moving. So did I. When I finally went back to my apartment, the silence felt different. Not lonely, clean. I put the frame drawing on my dining table and looked at it for a long time. The building where Julian and I met stared back at me in fine black lines and careful shadows. I had made that drawing as a love letter. Now it felt like a receipt for how much I had tried. So I took it apart. I removed the print from the frame, rolled it carefully, and put it in the back of my closet. Then I started a new drawing. Not the gallery where I met Julian, my parents' first apartment building in America. A narrow brick building in Queens with rusted fire escapes and windows that never quite closed right. My mother had once told me she and my father ate dinner on overturned boxes for 3 months because they could not afford chairs. My father worked double shifts in a machine shop and still came home smiling because, to him, that tiny apartment meant they had somewhere to begin. That was love. Not champagne, not Cartier ribbons, not being impressive enough for strangers. Love was sacrifice without an audience. Love was pride without performance. I spent nights redrawing those windows, those crooked lines, that chipped entrance step. When I finished, I hung it in my living room. For the first time in months, I was proud of something that had nothing to do with Julian. The consequences for him kept arriving in pieces. Ethan cut him off first. Madison stopped inviting him to dinners. Greg apparently told him the whole birthday scene made everyone uncomfortable, not because I walked out, but because Julian had been cruel and too drunk on attention to realize it. Brittany still talked to him, but even she had started saying things like, "You need to take accountability," which, from Brittany, was basically a public execution. Then there was Priscilla. I heard that part from Ethan, who heard it from Madison, who got it from Brittany. It sounded like gossip, but the details were too precise to be invented. Julian, lonely and embarrassed, reached out to Priscilla. Of course he did. The woman he had spent months turning into a symbol of everything I was not. They met for drinks at some rooftop bar. He probably wore his wounded but charming face. She probably let him talk just long enough to make him feel chosen. He went home with her. By morning, she was gone. All she left was a text. "Fun catching up. Let's do it again sometime." No tenderness, no promise, no emotional rescue. Just convenience dressed up as sophistication. The same kind of temporary he had made me feel. Later, much later, he would tell me that was when he understood. Not because he suddenly became noble, but because humiliation finally spoke his language. Meanwhile, my work became the center of my life in the best way. My firm assigned me to a major museum renovation project, the kind of project junior architects whisper about and senior architects guard like treasure. My lead designer trusted me with interior circulation concepts and a public exhibit component. I threw myself into it, with the kind of focus that almost felt like healing. Every clean line, every model, every late night in the studio reminded me that I had value in rooms Julian had never bothered to see. Month 2, his world kept shrinking. One of his major clients, someone who had been at the birthday dinner, requested a different account manager. His boss raised concerns about professionalism. His parents, who apparently heard the full story from someone other than him, cut back the money they had been quietly giving him. "We didn't raise you to be cruel," his mother reportedly said. He had to move to a smaller apartment in a less polished neighborhood. Then the phrase started following him. "Sorbet girl." Someone said it on a date, apparently. "Wait, are you the guy from that birthday dinner?" She laughed, then apologized, then left early. I almost felt bad when I heard that. Almost. But he had created a joke out of me in front of everyone. Now he was learning what it felt like when the joke turned around. 3 months after the dinner, Julian texted, "You still have some things here. When can I drop them off?" It was the first message I answered. "Leave them with my building manager." "Can I bring them to you? I'd like to talk." No. He came anyway. My building manager called. "There's a Julian Reeves here with a box. He says he needs 5 minutes. Tell him to leave it with you. If he refuses, call security." Julian waited in the lobby for 30 minutes. I watched from my window as he finally walked back to his car, still carrying the box, shoulders bent in a way I had never seen before. I felt nothing. And that was how I knew I was healing. 4 months after Julian's birthday dinner, the museum renovation project opened with a public exhibit. My firm had turned part of the old West Wing into a showcase of renderings, material studies, scale models, and concept boards. It was the kind of night I used to dream about when I was still sketching buildings on the back of grocery receipts, before I knew how many rooms in life would make me feel like I had to prove I belonged in them. That evening, I wore a black dress, simple earrings, and comfortable shoes, because I had finally learned that suffering for appearances was overrated. My parents came early. My father stood in front of one of my renderings for nearly 10 minutes, hands clasped behind his back, pretending he understood every technical note. My mother kept touching my arm and saying, "Look at this. Look what you made." Sophie arrived with her husband James and hugged me so hard I nearly dropped my program. Around us were colleagues, journalists, clients, people whose opinions actually mattered to my work. And for once, I was not standing at the edge of someone else's world hoping to be introduced properly. I was speaking with a local architecture writer about the circulation design when I saw Julian near the entrance. He stood still for a moment, scanning the room like he was trying to find the version of me who would have rushed over, grateful he had shown up. When his eyes landed on me, he froze. I finished my sentence before turning fully toward him. That mattered to me. I did not stop my life because he had walked back into it. "Hi," he said when he reached me. "Julian." He looked around at the exhibit, at my name printed beside the drawings, at my colleagues greeting me with respect. "Your work is beautiful," he said. "Really. You should be proud." "I am." The answer seemed to catch him off guard, like he expected me to shrink from praise out of habit. There was an awkward pause. Then he said, "I've been thinking about you." "Okay." His face tightened. "That's it? Just okay?" "What do you want me to say?" "I don't know, something. You were with me for 8 months, Carol. Now you look at me like I'm a stranger." I looked at him then, really looked. He seemed smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but somehow less polished, like the confidence he wore that night at Maria had been rented, and the bill had finally come due. "You called me a palate cleanser at your birthday dinner," I said. "In front of your ex-girlfriend, your friends, and half a restaurant. What did you think would happen?" "I expected you to let me apologize." "You did apologize. In voicemails, in texts, in emails, in flowers I didn't ask for." "And you ignored all of it?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because an apology doesn't undo what you said. It doesn't change the fact that for 8 months you treated me like something you were embarrassed to want." He looked wounded. "I was wrong." "No," I said quietly. "You were honest. That was the worst part. You finally said the truth out loud." He shook his head. "I was drunk. I was trying to impress people who don't matter." "They mattered more than I did. That's the point." His eyes filled, and for a second I remembered the man from the gallery where we met, the one who listened to me talk about buildings like they were love letters to cities. I had loved that version of him. Maybe he had been real for a little while. Maybe not. Either way, he was not enough to erase the man who seated me at the far end of his table and used me as a punchline. "I'm different now," he said. "Maybe you are, but I'm different too." "Carol, I love you." "No," I said gently. "You love the idea of being loved by someone who saw the best in you. But you didn't love me. Not enough to be proud of me. Not enough to protect me. Not enough to stop when everyone at that table went silent." He wiped his face quickly, embarrassed by his own tears. "So that's it? We've been over since your birthday. You're only just catching up." Behind him, I saw Sophie watching from across the room, arms crossed, ready to intervene if I needed her. I did not. My father stood near my drawing, my mother beside him, both of them looking proud. I had spent so long trying to fit into Julian's world that I had forgotten I already had people who would never call me temporary. "I hope you find what you're looking for," I told him. "But it isn't me." Then I walked back to my family. Sophie slipped her arm through mine. "You okay?" I looked at my parents, my work on the walls, the room full of people who saw me clearly, and the man behind me finally understanding what he had thrown away. "Yeah," I said. "I really am." The exhibit continued. I laughed. I answered questions. I stood beside my drawings and felt present in my own life. Julian eventually left, and I did not watch him go. I did not move on to someone new. I moved on to myself. And that was enough.